I moved into the Maplewood Heights condominiums on a crisp autumn afternoon, my arms loaded with boxes labeled Fragile and Kitchen. The building was a tidy 5-story structure nestled in a suburban neighborhood with leafy trees and meticulously trimmed hedges. It looked charming and quaint, the perfect place for a new beginning. On move-in day, a few residents offered me polite waves. I exchanged small talk with a retired couple on the 3rd floor who mentioned something about the HOA president being quite hands-on. I'd had some experiences with HOAs in the past, so I assumed it would be the usual litany of bylaws about noise levels or lawn care. I never imagined just how controlling Maplewood Heights HOA might be, or how fixated one individual, in particular, would become on personal details. That night, I collapsed onto my new couch, sipping tea from a disposable cup. The place already felt cozy, despite the half-unpacked boxes. Outside my window, streetlights glowed softly among the autumn leaves. This will be good, I told myself. A nice, quiet spot without too much drama. I had no inkling that I was about to clash with the most notorious figure in Maplewood Heights, Bethany Arnett, known to neighbors, but never to her face, as Karen. Barely 3 days had passed before I met Bethany Arnett in person. It was early morning. I stepped into the hallway, juggling my laptop bag and a coffee travel mug, only to nearly collide with a woman in a crisp button-down blouse and pencil skirt. Her posture was ramrod straight, her lips pressed into a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You must be the new resident," she announced, scanning me like a customs agent. "I'm Bethany Arnett, president of the Maplewood Heights HOA." She extended a manicured hand, and I shook it politely. "Hi, I'm Sam," I replied, returning her polite tone. "Just moved into 4C. Her gaze swept over my door, then lingered on the faint scuff mark near the threshold, a blemish from my moving day. "We have wonderful standards here," she said curtly. "I trust you received our rules packet? We like to keep everything in compliance for the sake of the community." I nodded, recalling the thick envelope stuffed in my mailbox. HOA bylaws, a welcome letter, and pages of guidelines about permissible decorations, visitor parking, trash disposal schedules, and more. It looked standard enough. Yes, I skimmed through it. Everything seemed straightforward. She gave a tight nod. "Do read it thoroughly. We take pride in Maplewood Heights." With that, she swept down the hall, heels clacking. A moment later, I heard her voice chiding someone for leaving a doormat too far from the door's edge. I exhaled, laughing softly. This was my first taste of the fabled Karen. Little did I know how creative she could get, and how soon we'd be at odds. A week later, an unexpected notice appeared on every resident's door. It was from the HOA board, more specifically, from Ms. Arnett. The message, printed on official Maplewood Heights letterhead, read, "Attention all residents. In order to enhance building security and ensure only authorized individuals occupy and access our floors, each resident is required to display a small personal ID photo near or on their front door. This measure will help us quickly verify residents if any incident occurs and deter strangers from wandering the premises. Guidelines. Photo must be of the unit owner or primary occupant. Photo should measure approximately 2 by 3 inches, wallet size. Must be posted near eye level on or beside the door. Implementation deadline, November 1st. Please note, noncompliance may result in HOA fines. Let us maintain a safe, harmonious environment. Sincerely, Bethany Arnett, HOA President." I stared at the announcement, baffled. An ID photo on my door? In all my years of apartment and condo living, I'd never heard of such a rule. It was invasive, like we were being asked to brand ourselves on the hallway wall. What if I didn't want my face plastered outside my home? Some neighbors mumbled dissent. Greg from 4A called it creepy. Maria from the 3B said it felt like living in a dorm. But Ms. Arnett insisted it was for security, and any protest fell on deaf ears. We had 3 weeks to comply or face fines. The tension in the building corridors thickened. As the deadline approached, hallway chatter became dominated by the photo rule. A few folks shrugged, planning to stick a tiny ID pic in a frame and be done with it. Others grumbled about privacy. Did we truly want strangers or visitors to see our faces posted outside our doors? We had a decent building security system. Why this additional step? Over coffee in the shared lounge, I met Linda, a friendly retiree from the 2nd floor. She confided, I asked Ms. Arnett if older residents could opt out. I'm a widow. I don't want my personal photo up in public. But she said no exceptions. She even threatened a penalty if the photo is too small or hidden behind glass. A hush fell as we realized Ms. Arnett was stepping into the lounge, scanning the room. She offered a thin-lipped smile, as though she suspected we were talking about her. "Remember," she said brightly, "it's for everyone's safety. Thieves or trespassers will think twice if they see we're a tight-knit community that recognizes each other's faces." With that logic, no one dared ask how a thief might be thwarted by a row of photos. But Ms. Arnett was unwavering. I found the rule invasive and misguided. But I also knew ignoring it outright would bring fines and harassment. So I hatched a plan, one that would technically comply while highlighting the absurdity of the rule. If Ms. Arnett wanted an ID photo, she'd get one, but on my terms. As an artist in my spare time, I had a knack for unusual pieces. A friend of mine specialized in lenticular prints, those 3D images that shift when you move, making them appear to follow you with their eyes. If I could secure a large lenticular portrait of my own face, it would be both hilarious and undeniably a photo of me. Sure, it wouldn't be the 2x3-inch wallet size Ms. Arnett demanded. But was that size an absolute limit or just a guideline? She'd said approximately 2 by 3 inches. Technically, approximate could be open to interpretation. The more I thought about it, the more I grinned. Ms. Arnett was always so exact, so formal. I longed to see her reaction to an enormous, slightly spooky 3D portrait haunting the corridor. Would it cross the line? Possibly. Would it be legal? According to the existing bylaws, we only had to display a personal ID photo. Nothing said it couldn't be large or stylized. I contacted my friend Monica, who owned a print shop specializing in custom lenticular artwork. Over a video call, I explained my comedic plan. She burst out laughing. "I love it. We can definitely do a big piece, maybe 18 by 24 inches. That's roughly the size of a standard poster. Can we make it slightly bigger?" I teased. "Like 2 feet wide, maybe?" Monica whistled. "Wow, you're going big." "Sure, we can go up to 24 by 36 inches. But that might be huge. Are you sure you can hang that outside your door?" I pictured the hallway, a neutral eggshell color, each door set into a recessed frame. If I installed the portrait carefully, it wouldn't obstruct the corridor. "Yes, I'll make it work," I said, adrenaline buzzing. I wanted in a slim black frame, too, to look classy, like a formal ID, but with style. Monica assured me she could produce a high-resolution photo in lenticular format so that the eyes seemed to follow the viewer. I giggled imagining Ms. Arnett's face when she saw it. "This is either going to be epic or get me in trouble," I said. Monica shrugged. "Technically, it's still your personal photo. Let them argue size if they want, but I bet they don't have a rule specifying maximum dimensions." She was right. The notice only said photo must be 2 by 3 inches approximately. That word approximately might be the key to my comedic loophole. Before Monica could create the lenticular portrait, I needed a suitably intense photo of myself. One weekend, I set up a makeshift studio in my living room, draping a neutral backdrop and positioning 2 bright lamps. I wanted the final image to look official yet unnerving, like the eyes were locked in a subtle challenge. I posed in a plain black shirt, arms at my sides, expression slightly serious. I tried a variety of angles until I found one that felt perfect, direct eye contact with a faint, enigmatic smirk. Then I took more shots with slight angle shifts, so Monica could produce the shifting effect. If done well, it would appear that my gaze followed people walking left to right in the hallway. Reviewing the photos, I chuckled at how dramatic they looked. One pose almost evoked a movie villain vibe, another a smug ID photo face. Ultimately, I settled on one that was neutral yet intense. I emailed the files to Monica, who replied, "Brilliant. This will look so good in 3D. I can't wait." Over the next few days, I almost felt giddy. While others fretted about the rule, I was actively subverting it with humor. Sure, Ms. Arnett might hate me, but I was done letting her micromanage every inch of my life. Meanwhile, Ms. Arnett ramped up her reminders. Notices appeared in the elevator, the mailroom, and on the community bulletin board. Reminder: ID photo deadline approaching. She even posted a mini FAQ. Question: can my photo be black and white? A. Yes, as long as the occupant is clearly identifiable. Question: can I place my photo in a small, tasteful frame? A. Yes, provided it does not exceed a few inches around. Question: May I post multiple images of myself? A. Only one is required, but you are free to include more if desired. The mention of a small, tasteful frame made me grin. My plan was the opposite of small and tasteful, but still a single image. The rules were fuzzy enough that I saw an opening. By day's end, neighbors whispered about Ms. Arnett's overbearing approach. Some had already posted tiny pictures next to their doorbells. Others were stalling until the final day. Linda, the retiree, confided to me that Ms. Arnett had singled her out for lack of compliance. Linda had pinned a photo inside a hinged cover, so it wouldn't show all the time. Ms. Arnett declared that was concealment, not allowed. Linda was exasperated. I might just do it and avoid the fine, she sighed. I can't keep arguing with her. I urged Linda to hold tight. I have a feeling Ms. Arnett's about to see a new approach, I hinted cryptically, not revealing specifics. She looked intrigued, but also worried for me. Finally, my print arrived from Monica's shop. The package was massive, nearly 4 feet in height, and I had to wrestle it upstairs with help from the front desk concierge. My heart pounded with excitement and a bit of nerves. If I posted something that large, was there a risk Ms. Arnett would accuse me of hallway obstruction? The condo rules said nothing about dimension limits, only about not blocking egress. My door was in a small recess, so it shouldn't impede foot traffic. I tore open the box carefully, revealing a glossy black frame containing the lenticular panel. Lifting the protective sheet, I stared at my own face, 2 feet wide, 3 feet tall, eyes glimmering with that subtle 3D effect. When I tilted it back and forth, the pupils seemed to track my movement. It was both impressive and deeply unsettling. I propped it against the wall, stepping back. Oh my gosh, I whispered. This is wild. It was definitely me. So Ms. Arnett couldn't claim it wasn't my photo. But the scale, imposing, comedic, would provoke strong reactions, no doubt. Already, I imagined how neighbors might shriek if they turned the corner and saw a giant face staring at them. Despite a twinge of guilt for scaring some folks, I pressed on. The entire point was to highlight how ridiculous it was to force ID pictures on every door. I told myself people might find it hilarious, or at least realize Ms. Arnett's directive had gone too far. The next evening, after most residents had retreated to their units, I quietly carried the portrait down the hallway. My heart thumped like a drum as I lifted it onto 2 hooks I'd carefully installed outside my door. The top of the frame sat about 5 feet from the floor, keeping it centered at eye level. Even from a few feet away, the eyes appeared to watch you as you moved. I used a tiny overhead hallway light for drama. It cast faint shadows, making the portrait look even more lifelike. This is either genius or a huge mistake, I told myself, stepping back. No matter, I was committed. At that late hour, nobody strolled by to witness my installation. Once secure, I retreated inside, adrenaline still pumping. We'll see how the morning crowd reacts, I mused. If Ms. Arnett tried to remove it, I'd have to argue it's my personal ID photo. Game on. Morning came. Around 6:30 a.m., I cracked my door open, peeking out. The hallway lights glowed, revealing my massive portrait in full, glowering intensity. The first neighbor I saw was Greg from 4A, who nearly dropped his gym bag when he spotted the huge face. His eyes widened. Then he burst out laughing. Dude, he hissed, muffling his chuckles. What in the world is that? It's terrifying and awesome. I stepped into the hall. My ID photo, I said with mock seriousness. We have to post them, right? Greg snorted. Well, it's definitely you. I can't wait to see Ms. Arnett's reaction. He gave me a thumbs up and headed to the elevator, still chortling. Over the next half hour, I heard gasps, giggles, and at least one shriek as unsuspecting neighbors rounded the corner. Some crouched, testing the 3D effect. Others snapped photos on their phones. A few older residents gently scolded me. That's a bit much, dear, one lady muttered. But even they seemed more bemused than angry. From inside my condo, I heard a swirl of chatter. Words drifted through the corridor. Giant portrait, so strange, eyes follow you. My phone buzzed with texts from friendly neighbors. This is epic. OMG, I almost spilled my coffee. I love the nerve you have. No sign of Ms. Arnett yet, but I knew it was only a matter of time. Around 8 a.m., a sharp rap sounded at my door. I inhaled deeply, bracing myself. Opening it, I found Ms. Arnett standing stiffly, arms folded. Her eyes darted to the portrait, which towered behind her. She must have confronted it head-on to reach my door. "What is this?" she demanded, voice quavering with controlled anger. You know perfectly well the requirement was for a small, discreet ID photo. This monstrosity is not in the spirit of the rule. I mustered my calmest expression. It's a personal photo of me, Ms. Arnett. I'm clearly identifiable, which meets your stated guidelines. You said wallet size or approximately 2 by 3 inches. The word approximately gives me latitude. She sputtered. But it's excessive. It's horrifying. People are complaining. I cocked an eyebrow. Oh, the rule never specified a maximum dimension, nor did it forbid certain styles, like 3D images. Also, you said we needed eye-level placement. That's exactly what I did. Her jaw tightened. This is not what we intended. We expected small, modest pictures. Yours could be considered a nuisance or even a hazard if it startles someone. I have the authority to order its removal if it's disruptive. I shrugged. I'm following the bylaws as written. If you want to enforce specific size limits or ban certain images, you'll need an amendment. Until then, I'm in compliance. She glared at me, her cheeks flushing. We'll see about that, she snapped. Then she turned on her heel and stormed off, high heels clacking on the tile floor. My heart pounded, but I felt a thrill of victory. I'd never stood up to an HOA mandate in such a bold way. No matter how Ms. Arnett threatened me, I had a decent legal footing, unless the board quickly rewrote the rules. Word of my giant portrait spread like wildfire. Residents ventured upstairs just to see it, some from lower floors, giggling and snapping selfies. A neighbor from 5B told me they overheard Ms. Arnett ranting to the building's property manager, demanding an immediate ban on oversized or disturbing images. But the manager apparently said it wasn't up to him. Only the HOA board could revise those guidelines, which would require a formal vote. Meanwhile, my phone blew up with messages. A few neighbors jokingly asked if they could get their own oversized portraits, turning the halls into an art gallery of giant faces. Others worried Ms. Arnett might retaliate. Watch out for fines, Linda warned. She might try claiming it's damaging the paint or unsafe. Greg teased me. You're like a folk hero around here now. People are calling your door the monolith or Big Brother's watching. I chuckled, though a part of me recognized the risk. Ms. Arnett was known to dig up obscure bylaws or conjure new regulations. She could also try to paint me as a troublemaker. But for now, I reveled in the comedic triumph. Sure enough, a memo arrived summoning all residents to an emergency HOA meeting. Ms. Arnett scheduled it for Saturday morning in the building's small community center. The topic, clarification of the ID photo policy. I could guess the agenda, shut down my portrait by rewriting the rules. I arrived at the meeting fashionably on time, finding the room packed with at least 30 neighbors. Ms. Arnett sat at a long table in front, flanked by 2 board members who rarely contradicted her. I took a seat near the back, noticing the curious or amused expressions from people who spotted me. Ms. Arnett opened by praising those who complied with the ID photo rule. Then, she sighed heavily, referencing a certain occupant who misused the guidelines to display an excessively large and potentially alarming image. Several folks snickered, glancing my way. She proposed an immediate amendment. Photos must not exceed 4 by 6 inches in size, must not be visually disruptive, and must not incorporate distortions or illusions that might startle passersby. She insisted these constraints were necessary to preserve a harmonious environment. A low rumble of dissent spread through the room. One woman said, "You never specified these details before. Now you're punishing someone who followed the letter of your initial rule." Another man piped up, "I actually find the big portrait hilarious, not disruptive. Are we that fragile?" The tension escalated. Ms. Arnett turned red, leaning into her microphone. "We must maintain order, not a freak show in our hallways." Then Linda, shy though she was, raised a trembling hand. "Ms. Arnett, if the original notice had stated specific size limits or style constraints, none of this would have happened. It's not right to spring new rules on us after the fact. We should be able to vote on whether we even want ID photos at all. Many of us never liked the idea to begin with." A ripple of agreement echoed. Ms. Arnett's face hardened. For the first time, her hold on the group seemed shaky. The meeting became a fiery debate about privacy, personal expression, and the scope of HOA authority. Several neighbors expressed that the entire ID photo policy felt invasive. Others said they didn't mind small photos for security reasons, but found Ms. Arnett's approach heavy-handed. My portrait became the catalyst for questioning the rule altogether. After an hour of spirited discussion, Ms. Arnett called for a vote on her proposed amendment. But to her shock, one of the board members, Ms. Whitaker, previously a mild supporter, spoke up. Maybe we should reconsider the entire ID policy. It's causing more strife than security. A wave of nods from the crowd. Ms. Arnett blanched, clearly unprepared for this revolt. She tried to salvage her stance. It's vital for building safety. The only reason we have conflict is because someone misused the guidelines. She shot me a glare. I raised my hand, receiving a nod from Ms. Whitaker. If I may speak. Ms. Arnett pursed her lips, but Ms. Whitaker nodded encouragingly. I'd be willing to size down my photo if we keep the policy, but I think a lot of folks want it gone entirely. Is it truly beneficial? Our building already has secure entry and cameras. This was an extreme measure forced on us. Applause broke out, surprising me. I saw Linda beaming, and even Greg pumping his fist lightly. Ms. Arnett's face reddened further. She stammered that a total repeal would be irresponsible, but the room's mood seemed swayed. Ms. Whitaker suggested a motion. Should we keep or repeal the ID photo requirement altogether? Another board member, Mr. Daniels, seconded it. Ms. Arnett looked flustered. She was losing control of the narrative. The entire meeting was overshadowed by the sentiment that the rule was poorly thought out and authoritarian. The residents voted, hands raised high. In an unexpected landslide, the majority favored repealing the ID photo requirement entirely. Shocked gasps rippled through the room, followed by a smattering of cheers. Ms. Arnett's expression was thunderous, but she had no choice but to accept the result. The board had spoken, and the residents overwhelmingly wanted no part of mandatory door photos. A hush settled, everyone realizing we'd just undone Ms. Arnett's prized security measure. Ms. Whitaker ended the meeting graciously, thanking everyone for civil discourse. I caught Ms. Arnett's eye from across the room. Her glare was icy. She clearly blamed me for appending her plan, but I felt an enormous rush of relief and a bit of triumph. Not only had I sidestepped any further scolding about my giant portrait, but the entire building was now spared this intrusive policy. My comedic protest had triggered a broader awakening that we didn't have to bow to every one of Ms. Arnett's demands. With the ID photo rule officially repealed, many neighbors tore down their small pictures. The hallway walls returned to their standard, decoration-free look. But what about my massive 3D portrait? Technically, it no longer served a required purpose. Was I still allowed to keep it? For a few days, I left it up, unsure of the next steps. Neighbors passing by would still chuckle or wave at my giant face. But Ms. Arnett lurked, scowling whenever she saw it. Then, late one evening, I found a typed note slid under my door. Mr. Sam, Unit 4C. Since the ID photo policy is repealed, your portrait can no longer be justified as compliance. It has become an unsolicited hallway decoration, which is disallowed under Section 2.4.7 of the bylaws, prohibiting personal fixtures in common spaces. You are instructed to remove it within 48 hours or face fines. Bethany Arnett, HOA President. I sighed. Of course Ms. Arnett would try a different angle. She must have combed through the bylaws for a rule about hallway fixtures. She wasn't entirely wrong. The building typically banned personal decor in shared hallways. But we did allow wreaths or small nameplates on doors, so maybe there was a gray area. Still, a 2-by-3-foot portrait likely fell outside the small item exceptions. I decided not to wage a pointless war over the portrait's presence in the hallway now that the ID rule was gone. The main objective, exposing how ridiculous the policy was, had been achieved. However, I couldn't resist leaving a small parting statement. Before removing the big piece, I replaced it with a smaller, equally dramatic version, an 8-by-10-inch lenticular print with the same effect. I fastened it directly to my door, just like folks sometimes do with holiday wreaths or door signs. A door is typically considered the boundary of personal property in many condos. If Ms. Arnett tried to say it was in the hallway, I could argue that a door decoration is generally acceptable, as residents often put nameplates or seasonal decor there. The next morning, Neighbors discovered the big portrait gone, but now an 8 by 10 version stared from my door, its eyes still following passersby. I heard bursts of laughter. At least it wasn't as huge, so fewer folks would be startled, and Ms. Arnett had less ground to stand on regarding obstruction. Sure enough, she confronted me, fuming that it was still disruptive. But I calmly pointed out that door decorations were not explicitly forbidden unless they were offensive or obstructive. She threatened a board vote to ban lenticular images, but after the fiasco with the ID rule, she lacked the broad support she once had. People rolled their eyes at her vendetta. After the meltdown of the ID policy, Ms. Arnett's iron grip on Maplewood Heights began to loosen. Several residents whispered about encouraging Ms. Whitaker to run for president in the next HOA election. The sense was that Ms. Arnett had overreached, lost credibility, and was now clinging to minor battles just to save face. Linda, the retiree, was especially relieved. That ID policy had me so stressed, she said over coffee in my living room one weekend. Now I can live in peace. I nodded. I'm sorry you had to endure that, but at least it's done. And hopefully Ms. Arnett thinks twice before imposing more bizarre rules. Meanwhile, folks still joked about my 3D portrait stunt. Some credited it with galvanizing the building's pushback. You basically trolled Karen into losing the entire policy, Greg quipped. I'd grin, disclaiming it was more about making a point than fueling a vendetta, though I did relish the comedic angle. Over the next couple of months, Ms. Arnett maintained her position as HOA president, but she backed off from large-scale edicts. She still filed occasional petty complaints about recycling bins or doormats, but no major new rules emerged. The board, led by Ms. Whitaker and Mr. Daniels, quietly shaped a more democratic approach, letting residents voice opinions at monthly meetings. Each time Ms. Arnett glared at my door and saw the smaller lenticular photo, she'd purse her lips but say nothing. She must have realized it was a lost cause. An 8 by 10 on a door was mild compared to the original giant. Residents teased that if Ms. Arnett kept pushing, she risked another wave of backlash. In a surprising twist, Ms. Whitaker proposed a voluntary occupant photo directory for those who wanted it. That directory would be kept in the manager's office, accessible only to staff or board members if an incident arose. A far more reasonable approach than forcing everyone to plaster a photo outside their door. By springtime, Maplewood Heights felt more welcoming. Neighbors chatted in the lobby, no longer bracing themselves for intrusive mandates. Ms. Whitaker's leadership style, still overshadowed by Ms. Arnett's official title, gave people hope that the next election might usher in real change. Greg organized a small condo potluck in the shared lounge, the first social event the building had seen in a while. Even Ms. Arnett attended, though she hovered near the punch bowl with forced politeness. Residents mingled with real camaraderie, relieved to be free of photo controversies. I even had a friendly, if terse, exchange with Ms. Arnett about the building's landscaping. The most heartening part, Linda told me she now felt comfortable inviting her grandchildren over, not worried about petty scolding for nonsense infractions. You changed the climate here, Sam, she said with a warm smile. I blushed, insisting it was a group effort. Eventually, the HOA election arrived. Ms. Arnett ran again, determined to keep her role, but Ms. Whitaker challenged her with a platform of respect, transparency, and moderate policies. The memory of the ID fiasco lingered in everyone's minds. At the annual meeting, ballots were cast. Residents left the polling station wearing triumphant grins. When the results were tallied, Ms. Whitaker won by a comfortable margin, effectively replacing Ms. Arnett as president. A ripple of joy swept the room, while Ms. Arnett maintained a tight-lipped smile, forced to congratulate the victor. That evening, a sense of renewal washed over Maplewood Heights. People felt their voices had been heard. Ms. Whitaker's first act as president was to formally strike the old ID policy from the records, ensuring it could never be resurrected. She also introduced guidelines encouraging open dialogue before any major rule changes. No more top-down proclamations that blindsided everyone. Standing outside my door, I gently touched the 3D portrait, remembering the chaos it triggered. Part of me considered taking it down now that the rule was gone and Ms. Arnett was dethroned. But neighbors insisted they liked it, said it was a hilarious reminder of what could happen when an HOA oversteps. So, with Ms. Whitaker's blessing, I left it up, a small, Well, medium-sized, testament to creative rebellion. Life in Maplewood Heights grew calmer, friendlier. Ms. Arnett, no longer the HOA president, remained in the building, but her influence waned. She gradually relaxed, perhaps realizing the community thrived better under balanced leadership. Occasionally, she'd cast a disdainful look at my door portrait, but more and more often, she just walked past without comment. Residents marveled at the shift. Linda confided that she felt safer now, not because of ID photos on doors, but because the building had grown more united, less fearful of arbitrary fines. Greg started a weekly movie night in the lounge. The potlucks became regular events. A neighbor from 1B proposed a community garden project on the small patch of lawn out back. As for me, I settled into my new home with a deep sense of satisfaction. My comedic protest had helped unravel a nonsensical rule, setting the stage for positive change. Sure, it caused tension in the short run, but it opened everyone's eyes. Sometimes, the best way to handle an overzealous Karen is not to argue at length, but to show how absurd their demands can be, by taking them literally in the most outlandish way. In the end, Maplewood Heights remained a peaceful, pleasant place to live. The fiasco over door photos became local lore, recounted to newcomers as a cautionary tale about unchecked HOA power. And my big little 3D portrait was an enduring conversation starter, proof that a dash of humor, cleverly applied, can topple even the most rigid rule. So, we all got our happy ending. No more forced ID pictures, a more reasonable HOA leadership, and a giant face in the hallway that always made passersby grin, even if it did follow them with its eyes.